if you can align your tax goal with your business goals, you can actually be a part of ensuring that you can both capture and protect the value created by the business.
Welcome to the first episode of Tax Leaders Unplugged. This is a podcast about learning from the best tax leaders out there. My name is Stevi and I'm your host for today. And in this podcast series, we will have casual but thought-provoking conversations with the best in-house tax professionals out there. And we aim to unlock learnings from them for you. So stay tuned if you want to grow as an in-house tax professional, or if you want to be inspired by your peers, or just enjoy an entertaining chat about taxes. And today, for this first episode, we have a great guest in the studio. We have Karl Berlin, who is the head of tax of Ørsted, and he's having that position for the last 7 years. And for those who don't know, Ørsted is one of the leading renewable energy companies with headquarters in Denmark. And Karl, before having this role at Ørsted, had a career at Maersk, where he held different positions in the in-house tax team, up to the level of head of tax, also of one of the business units in that big organization. And Karl is based out of Malmö, Sweden. So Karl, nice to have you here.
Thank you, Stevie. Nice to be here.
Karl, as a couple of icebreakers to scene. You being from the Nordics, you also having links with both Denmark and Sweden. I'm struggling for a long time already with some of those very hyped concepts that you have in the Nordics, where I'm seeing them coming by on social media. And I also have, for the audience here, my wife is active as an interior designer. So she's very close to those concepts, but I struggle to understand what they are about. And we are talking here about, and forgive me, maybe the wrong pronunciation, but we are talking about Hygge from Denmark and Lagom from Sweden. Karl, can you help me out? Like, what do they mean and what do they mean for you?
Yeah, I'll try. So I am Swedish and I live in Sweden and I worked my entire career in Denmark. And if we start with the Danish word hygge, it is a concept of coziness, basically. So to have a cozy atmosphere, a cozy setting, cozy activities. I think that's the best way to describe it. You can have it in wintertime with mulled wine and Christmas cakes, or you can have it in the summer in a picnic and stuff like that, but just to have a really cozy time.
And is it something that could be applied in a business office tax context or not?
Yeah, for sure. We do a lot to ensure that we have a lot of hygge in the tax department's area in the Ørsted offices, by making sure that we have some nice lighting and some of the awards that we won, that we've hung them up and that we have some plants and stuff like that.
Ah, that's interesting. So it's something that is actively like pursued as an atmosphere, a state you want to have in the office. Oh, that's nice.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's nice. That's nice. I would not expect that from tax people, but that's great to hear that there is a crossover from the different industries, even into the tax industry.
For sure.
And the other one, Lagom, is that also one where
Lagom? That's Swedish. That's a Swedish word, and it's perfect. It's probably a humble version of just perfect, because it doesn't mean perfect, but it means just perfect or just enough. So if you've made a meal for some guests and you have it is just enough, just perfect. It's not too much, it's not too little, it's not too plentiful, it's not too luxurious, it's not too humble. It's just as it should be.
That is then maybe a dangerous one to apply in tax, because there it should be like, I mean, I don't know whether I understand it really correctly, but just perfect, it's like it cannot be like close to perfect. Typically in tax, it should be very
you could also translate it with the word moderate. So
all right. Yeah. So then it becomes really dangerous, I guess, to apply that one in the tax domain.
No, I think that's probably a nice place to be, to have a moderate approach to tax stuff.
Yeah, okay, maybe I'm biased. I'm thinking in terms of like filings, positions to take, documenting them, making sure that you have checked all of the details.
Yeah, I mean, but moderate doesn't mean sloppy. But if you want to make sure, I think it's in the tax world, I don't think anyone has ever filed a tax return that is 100% correct. And if you strive for that, you're probably never going to file anything, and that's a bigger problem, I think.
Yeah, true. No, that's
Yeah.
a fair point. That's a fair point. And it's all about taking positions and
Yeah.
taking the position which you can best defend, which aligns most closely to your objectives and values and etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. No, cool. Thanks for that. So I don't know whether it really clarified a lot, I guess, the Hygge more than the Lagom, but thanks for that, Karl, in any case. If you look at your current role in the tax domain, if you weren't working in tax, what other profession or domain would you have ended up in, and why? Is that something you have ever reflected on?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just a coincidence that I ended up working with tax. I mean, I have a legal background. I went to law school, and I did not really pursue any the tax field while at law school. I went for procedural law instead, and especially international procedural law, or more specifically, how you can use material EU law in national proceedings. So I probably would have worked with that if I hadn't done taxes, one way or another. Yeah.
Yeah, which is still a subdomain of law, so not very far from where you're currently at.
Not very far, no.
But then again, at the same time, content-wise, very different. Or yeah. That's interesting. And if you also look back, I described a bit like your previous careers. What I find a bit remarkable, or what catched my attention, is the absence of any Big Four, or in any case advisory background in your case. Is that something which you can explain? Was it on purpose, as well as just like coincidence that you immediately
No,
went?
it was pure coincidence, because when I'd finished law school, I actually taught procedural law for a semester, but I wasn't sure I wanted to do that, and I stumbled across a job ad from Maersk, where they were looking for recent law graduates from Scandinavia who spoke a Scandinavian language to join their group tax function in Copenhagen. And I'd never thought I'd work with tax, so I hadn't ever considered pursuing a career with an advisor. But I thought Maersk was a super cool company, so I spoke to my boyfriend, who's now my husband, whether we would be interested in moving to Copenhagen. I was pretty sure I'd gonna get the job, and then I could apply for something else when I'd gotten into the company. And we said, yeah. We lived in Stockholm back then, so I applied for a job with Maersk, and it went well, and I got the job, and we moved down, and pretty quickly I found out that working with tax in-house is actually super exciting and much more fun than the few courses of tax law I'd taken during law school. So from there, it just continued, and there was never any reason for me to leave the setting I was in then, because the job at Maersk was constantly evolving, and I worked in group functions and in business units and tax back then. I think from the late noughties and onwards, were developing into where we are today. So it was just so exciting, and so many different opportunities, both internationally and what I actually did for the work, so to speak. So I was fulfilled.
Yeah, that's great to hear. On the other hand, have you never been hungry to experience what life in the advisory side of things looks like in the Big Four? Because if I look at myself, it in any case has been a very significant learning experience for me to start my career over there. Have you ever felt the slightest temptation to go to the Big Four, or is it or to the advisory side of things, or were you always convinced that you are made for being on the in-house side?
No, not at all. I'm not convinced of that. I've just been super fortunate to have jobs at different levels, both at Maersk and then when I joined Ørsted as head of tax. That is so fascinating and interesting, and allows me to do what I think is necessary for the tax function to develop, and for myself to develop personally, that I've never given it a thought. But of course, I've many friends working in in advisors, and I have a pretty good feeling what the job is about. I mean, I work a lot with advisors, and it for sure seems like a super interesting role. I think what has been my luxury, and any person's luxury working in-house, is that you get to be a part. If you play your cards right, and if you make yourself a relevant business partner, you get to follow projects from the cradle to the grave, and you get an insight into the workings of a business that might be quite difficult to pick up on if you're an advisor.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. That is definitely also one of the reasons why I at the time moved in-house, because you want to have that end-to-end experience, not only just providing a piece of advice or a support in a controversy or whatever, but you want to make sure, like, and what if this gets implemented, and the next until the
I guess the luxury, if you compare, if an advisor, is that you can probably spend more time digging into the technical details of stuff than you can in-house, because you simply don't have the time for that. That's why you use advisors to help you with parts where you may have a feeling where you want to go, but you simply don't have the time or the bandwidth to look into the really juicy stuff of tax law and accounting.
Yeah, true. And if you then look back at your learning experience in the very early days at Maersk, how do you describe that? Like, who were then your bigger mentors? Who were the people that you were learning from? Was it self-taught, or did you then learn a lot still on the job from your colleagues, from your?
I mean, it was almost 100% on the job training. I had some great bosses when I worked for Maersk who were super skilled in tax, and my first boss was Clive Baxter. He was the group head of tax at Maersk, and I had another boss, Preben Thorsen, who was my head of tax in a business unit, and they were really willing to share of their knowledge, and also not afraid to throw me out at the deep end of the swimming pool, so to say, and see if I could swim, ready to pick me up when I was drowning, but then using those experiences to understand the workings of tax law. I mean, I had my legal training and the legal methodology, but I was kind of I'd never worked with tax law or international tax law, so that was on the job training, applying it to real business situations.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if I look back also at my case, I'm trained as corporate tax, international tax, and then some real estate focus. What would you say, like, what was your first experience with the tax domain, and where would you say, like, it all started with, or where do you have like one of the other tax domains that are a bit more developed, or is it all like more jack of all trades type of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if there are two industries that I've worked with my entire career, and it's shipping on one side, and both the European tonnage tax regimes and also Article 8 of double tax treaties, and also energy and energy infrastructure, and most recently the green transformation. But of course, within the companies, I've had to deal with a lot of different tax regimes. So I've dabbled with not only corporate tax or corporate income tax, but also with various indirect taxes regimes, so VAT and GST and HST and all that, and import duties and export taxes. I've also had to deal with some West African personal income tax regimes. So in a way, you get kind of a jack of all trades.
No, that's interesting. Karl, I've been lucky to see you already a couple of times on stage the last couple of months and years. And I know one of the topics that you really are passionate about is making sure that the tax is high enough on the agenda of senior management, the executive committee, the senior stakeholders, the board, which definitely is, I guess, somehow a positive trend observation that we can see across different companies, that it is on the rise, at least. But for yourself as a tax leader, looking at your current company, what are the initiatives that you have undertaken there to make sure that the tax becomes an agenda item? And how do you deal in general with that difficulty that you basically are talking tax to non-tax people?
Yeah. So I think there are two ways you can look at it, and I think they complement each other. And if we take the big societal view on it, is that tax is not only a cost for companies, it's also the way how we fund our societies. So it's a part of a social contract, and meaning that where on the one hand tax is an operating expenditure which we need to manage, being a part of the social contract, we can't just use any means to reduce that cost. The other part is if you can align your tax goal with your business goals, you can actually be a part of ensuring that you can both capture and protect the value created by the business. So if the value of a transaction or a business operation is X, I mean, a part of that is after tax, and you make sure that after tax is exactly what you think it's be. So you don't assume risks that you're either not aware of or that you're not prepared to take, because the risk appetite is above what yours is. So if you can explain that to senior leaders in a comprehensible way and also understand what the business is about, I think you've come really far, because then you make tax about the business. Then you make tax being something about the business and not about tax.
Yeah. And is it fair to say that you are somehow lucky that you are in an organization where sustainability, ESG, is like a no-brainer? It's in the DNA of the company. So for you, having these conversations with those non-tax people, or making sure that they get the minimum understanding of tax topics and understand indeed the social contract you were referring to. In other words, what would you say, like, what are maybe recommendations you could give for industries where this is far from the case, where they are lagging behind, where they and I have also have had experiences there where sometimes either they are too much in the trenches of other projects and M&A and business as usual, and tax is just not, they don't have the headspace for it, or it's just too complex, and it's just and that's maybe also something then to reflect on as a tax professional. If it is too complex, is it maybe also in the explanation and the messaging around it? But what are recommendations that you would give to the broader audience to make sure that at least it's a rising agenda item for the senior management?
I think I'm fortunate in that way that the company I'm currently working for has spent a lot of time discussing what does sustainability means, and of course for the core operations it's pretty clear. But what does it mean for the support functions such as tax? And we've spent a lot of time discussing that, and at the end of the day, sustainability means something that will sustain for a long time. So in tax, it means that you have robust positions. It means that even if a position would be challenged by a tax agency, you think that you will win ultimately in a court of law. That is a sustainable position. It is also sustainable to make sure that you don't pay too much in tax, because if you pay too much in tax, you take away money from developing the business. If you pay too little in tax, you'll eventually be caught up, and that will detract from the business again, both reputationally and also cash wise. So that is sustainable tax for me. And furthermore, it's also making sure that you can talk tax with non-tax people. You have so many different stakeholders as a tax director. It's in the business, it'll be commercial people, operational people, it might be executive leaders, it might be the board of directors and audit and risk committee, and you need to find a way to explain tax in a way that makes sense for them, not in a way that makes sense for you. Because we're trained experts, but they are not. And if other things can be explained in a way that they can understand, I'm sure tax can be as well. Sustainable tax for us also means that since we are in a business that will create some tax risks. We do a lot of cross-border transactions. We finance some of the stuff with state aid. There's a lot of money involved and long projects and super expensive projects. So we know that we are prone to audits and risks and sometimes tax agencies with a more fiscal than principled approach. So a lot of people want bigger parts of the cake than there is cake. So we knew that in order to mitigate that risk, we want to be very transparent of what we're doing and talk to our various stakeholders on that. So that when we have controversies or disagreements, the issue will be on the facts of those and not about rumors or assumptions of what we're doing.
Yeah. All right. And is tax like I don't know about the exact structure of the leadership, etc. But is it a recurring item on, for example, leadership meetings where you are then presenting the highlights, the lowlights, the forecast, or how do you keep that top of mind? Is there a structure in your organization to ensure that?
So I mean, typically tax is just an operational charge, which is good. But to the since we have a number of audits that we also explain in the annual report, it's also a recurring theme to the audit and risk committee, where we regularly report on tax risks and how we are dealing with them and how we propose to mitigate future tax risks. So we've also informed our audit and risk committee about things like the Pillar 2, the US corporate annual minimum tax, CBAM, and the efforts we're doing, what it could mean for the business and how we're dealing with those risks. So we're reporting on stuff like that as well.
All right, clear. If you look at yourself, your tax team, and so we talked a bit about the senior stakeholders you're having in the organization, but obviously, like one or the more important, you already referred to it, is the business as a stakeholder. You have those projects, the complexity of your business, the close relationship that is required. One of the more important things there to guarantee is, I guess, having a seat at the table so that the business knows that you as a tax team, first of all, exist. I guess that is already an achievement in itself. But secondly, also that they understand that you are there to support them, right? What would you say there is, how do you manage that in your organization, make sure that you are the preferred partner for the business and that you have that seat at the table guaranteed?
I mean, that seat at the table is, I mean, you can get it formally, but you also, I mean, if you want to get it in for real, you have to earn it. And I think we do it by really being a part of the business and being interested in the business and maybe using our ears more than our mouths. So we take an interest in what's going on. We ask a lot of questions to learn about the business, and then we can tell the various people who work with how we can help and how we can structure and how we can see some problems that we need to deal with and do that in a constructive way. And I think if you were to talk with a lot of people in the Ørsted tax team, a lot of people would say what they do for a job is to support the green transition, and not necessarily start by saying that they work with tax accounting or deferred taxes or stuff like that. So make yourself a part of the business and be out there. We don't spend that much time at our desk. We spend more time out in the business, talking with people and learning from them.
And I like the fact that you say like you need to earn your seat at the table. That's something that really resonates to me. Does it mean, for example, that your team, you are deeply involved in business updates, in weekly business project meetings? Do you go on site to see what's going on, to have a very good understanding and line?
Yeah, we do that. I mean, the challenge sometimes is that since Ørsted is a project organization, every project has its own team. So we have to earn that mandate or the respect every time with sometimes with new people. But yeah, we are part of project groups of teams and we go out to sites visit and stuff like that. And then what's also very helpful is that we are a part of the investment committee controlling group. So whenever a proposal goes to the investment committee, there is a sign-off procedure, including tax. And of course, we can't sign off on anything that we're given like a day to look at. But when we've been involved in a project from the very start, we know the tax workings in and out. So it's super easy to sign out. And if there's a sign off lacking, I mean that's a problem for the project and not for tax. So there's like a stick and a carrot as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And does it then also happen like and it's more in general, I guess, because I'm also reflecting back on my in-house career. It's not always good news that you bring to the business, right? Sometimes it can come across that you are the showstopper because there are undesired tax implications. It's just not possible. The complexity you bring. How do you reconcile that with then still earning your seat at the table?
I mean, we always want to see ourselves as enablers of business operations and not the Department of Business Prevention, which is a classical trap to fall into. But sometimes stuff is just not possible to do in the contemplated way. Then you have to try and find different ways. And sometimes you just can't. And then, of course, they say, well, tax, you've killed the project. And it's like, well, actually, we didn't. I mean, the rules did. And we couldn't find any other way of doing it. So actually, the case was not viable. And at the end of the day, people are happier that we kill a project that early than if we throw a lot of money on it and then find out that we got the tax rules wrong. And actually, the margin that we thought we were going to get was below what we request. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess indeed, the earlier the better. If it needs to be killed, then better in an early stage. At the same time, the objectives of the business are very different from the objectives the tax team have, although probably you would expect that there are shared objectives as a team. But in reality, there can be reasons why the business wants to proceed with one or the other idea, whereas for tax it's a no-go, and then you somehow by nature have a conflict of interest, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's I don't think we have like conflicting interests. I mean, we all have an interest in complying with the law and making sure that we capture and protect the value in a transaction. So, I mean, for example, we can, if the business wants to employ people in countries where we don't have representations, we will not say you can't do that because it will create a PE. We will say, yeah, you can do that, and it will create a permanent establishment, which will cost you X. If you're willing to take the cost of X, just go ahead. However, on the other hand, if the business says, yeah, we're going to do that, and we will not allow you to file a PE return, we'll say, well, that's our decision, not yours. So,
makes sense. If we look a bit at your company, Ørsted, definitely one of the front runners when it comes to, as I already said, like responsible tax behavior, sustainable tax behavior. We have seen that you have the accreditation as a fair tax organization.
Mhm.
You're also an endorsing company of the B Team Responsible Tax Principles. For the bigger audience out there, like in general, sustainable tax, responsible tax behavior, how do you define that? How do you, let's maybe start with that, giving it an understandable and practical definition.
Yeah, I think for us, the first part is that we tell people about our tax practices, and then the second part is we show people how we apply the tax practices. So it's I mean, one thing is telling, the other is showing. And then we also want to be a part of the tax debate, and make sure that rules and legislations that are proposed are efficient and effective, and that they promote the green transition and doesn't prevent it. And our analysis says that, well, if we want to be a part of that discussion and the debate, we need to have a certain credibility. And we think we get the credibility by showing what we do, but also by participating in various networks and organizations such as the B Team, which is working to create more sustainable capitalism, and also the fair tax mark, which is like an independent gold standard, where people say that, yes, we have looked into what you're doing and we agree with your practices, rather than us just saying that we've reviewed ourselves and we're happy with what we're doing.
Yeah, and how would you pitch or sell the value of those accreditations to the audience here? Like, what is for you like the bigger reasons why you would apply for it as a?
I mean, if we take the B Team, for example, it's because we want to engage with other companies and with NGOs, and how we can develop practices and how we can engage better and understand each other and have debates built on facts instead of misunderstandings or assumptions. And when it comes to the fair tax mark, we wanted to have an independent accreditation of what we're doing to build on the credibility of what we're doing.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And when we have that credibility, I think it's easier for us to participate in discussions with policymakers and legislators, and whether it's on the national scene or whether it's on the international scene, because people will not look at us with mistrust immediately, but think that we maybe have something to say or contribute to the discussion.
Yeah, no, that's clear. So if you think about practically, if you can still recall when your organization, your team was applying for it, like very, very practically getting started, your first steps towards, and it's maybe two different type of certifications or accreditations at the B team and the fair tax mark. But getting started, like the very first steps for tax leaders there that are far off from it, what would you say are the first steps to take?
Yeah, I mean, the first step that we took was back in 2017, when we decided that we wanted to update our tax policy and build a story about what does sustainability means for tax in a company like Ørsted. And we spent a lot of time internally and with the business and looked at what are other companies doing, what is the B team saying, what does auditors saying, what does NGOs say. And we said, okay, so we get all this inspiration. What do we want to do? What do we want to say? And then we built our policy and reporting based on that. And that was the first step. And then we said, well, can we join you in B teams and participate that way? But we started with ourselves. And then we developed, when GRI 207 came, we say, well, that's a good standard to report on taxes in the annual report. So let's draw some inspiration from that. And we did that. And then when we were approached by the fair tax mark, we said, well, it looks like a good case for us. And since we had done what made sense for us and drawn so much inspiration from the civil society, I mean, that was quite an easy process for us. But I think my advice to anyone is to start by looking at yourself and see what makes sense for you and what makes sense for your stakeholders.
Yeah, because indeed it can be that it is like in your case, having a better relationship or more active and closer conversation with NGOs, but it can be completely different outcome for other companies, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for us, we I mean, we build huge wind farms in local societies. We want to show that we are part of those local communities. We pay taxes in the countries where we operate and create value. We deal with NGOs. We want to be sustainable in everything we do. So that was our case, and we also wanted to show to analysts and investors that yes, there are tax risks. We have dealt with the tax risk this way in a transparent way, so that will never be a surprise. And that was the reason for us. Not that we wanted to go for an accreditation. It was a business need for us to do some stuff, and then based on that we could get the accreditation.
Yep. Obviously, those accreditations, they don't rule out controversy. Controversy stays part of life, right? How do you deal with that? Like, because I can imagine that you do the extra mile, you do the extra efforts for the accreditation, but at the same time, sometimes you still end up in let's say a conflict in other
we have conflicts, and I think we have I mean, in Denmark, where we're headquartered, we have received the largest reassessments in Danish history. It's not a record I'm happy with, but I'm comfortable that we will eventually win. And basically what we want to do is we want to avoid unnecessary conflicts. I think if you go for avoiding any conflicts, you will be way too conservative and you lose a lot of value, because I mean, there are certain tax agencies that are very fiscally minded. So if you just want to appease them at all times and not see, okay, what's the legal merit behind something, you will pay too much in tax. And so we do that by saying, well, we have a risk appetite, which is based on a more likely than not approach. And so we do a very thorough analysis of our positions and say, well, if it's more likely than not that whether attacked or not, we will ultimately prevail in an ultimate court of law or in an arbitration, we will take that position if it makes sense and it's aligned with the business values. Of course, I mean, that is a prerequisite. So I guess being very, very good at the technical stuff will not entirely erase the conflicts or disagreements, because they will arise, but it will at least make sure that the disagreements that you have you have a good position, and you can create some certainty on or assurance on your positions. I mean, certainly you can't. But.
Yeah, because I like the fact that you used the word unnecessary risks that triggered
Yeah.
my attention. What would you say is the definition of an unnecessary risk?
I think an unnecessary risk is to take positions that you don't believe in yourself. An unnecessary risk is to have a risk appetite based on whether you'll be found out or not. I think an unnecessary risk is to be sloppy in implementation of tax advice or structures. It's poor housekeeping. That is completely unnecessary risks. Or if there is a huge uncertainty around an area and the amount is large, I think it would be unwise to not go for a binding ruling, for example, or have an upfront discussion with tax agency around the treatment of a transaction. So
yeah, no, that is clear. If they would drop you, Karl, in any random multinational tomorrow as a head of tax, how would you identify unnecessary risks in that company? Like, is there a method, an approach that you would apply to get rid of them immediately or in the shortest amount of time possible? What would you recommend to the
I mean,
audience?
if you've assumed a lot of unnecessary risks, I mean, it's hard to get rid of them immediately. I mean, what you can do is, of course, disclose them and fix your positions. But I guess it's looking at your processes for anything tax related, and of course that is everything basically. But one way to start is I think in your tax returns, how good are your tax accounting people at understanding the business? Do you actually understand the underlying result that the business is presenting, or are you having a hard time explaining why the ETR is what it is? If you understand the business and you can explain the ETR in a good way, you understand. I mean, the results you get make sense to you. I think you're probably in a nice place.
Yeah. No, and I hear you. So first of all, you refer to processes and the importance of that. And then secondly, also having that good understanding of the business and how all of this translates then in the end, indeed, the right tax accounting entries that are required. About processes in itself, are there any things that you can share here with the audience, like how best practices process-wise, tax process-wise, that you can recommend, even like getting started small, simple? What are the first things you would recommend in terms of upskilling your tax processes?
I think, to be honest, and this is not a tax process, but it is make sure that you actually understand your business and how value is created in your business. And if you really understand that, then you can start it. Okay, so what kind of processes do I need for TP? Is my transfer pricing documentation accurately reflecting the business? Do we claim capital allowances or tax depreciations in the right way, or have we missed out on something or misunderstood something? Do we have a lot of people traveling around? Have we registered PEs necessarily or unnecessarily? Do we lose out on VAT refunds, or are we claiming too much? So my recommendation is to start with making sure that you really understand how value is created in the business and the value drivers of your business.
Yeah, that is something where TP people are probably familiar with the value chain, and
but if there is something then that I would add that where TP people sometimes miss out is that that's all fine, but tax law is also law. So you need to understand. I mean, one thing is what kind of economic analysis you might arrive at, but you also need a good foundation in the legal workings of the tax law.
Yeah, I hear you. I guess that that is indeed making that bridge to from the theory, let's say, to the practice from
and
us.
Back again.
No, and if I listen here to you, Karl, I mean, you come across as very mature as a tax leader. I guess your tax team is mature because you have earned those accreditations. But if you would reflect on the younger Karl at the beginning part of your career, How would you say that you as a person have evolved over time? Like, what is the biggest evolution that you can see in yourself from the Karl that started at Maersk in the early days to the head of tax you are right now at Ørsted?
I mean, I was very young and very inexperienced. I couldn't understand that if we had, and back then I think we were much more working in the corner of the accounting department than being a part of the business. So when we were presented for a problem, it was typically post fact. So and we had to fix stuff, and then the business was unwilling to change anything or admit that they'd done something. So everything was firefighting back then, and there were a lot of conflicts based on how you have to deal with firefighting, and also not understanding. I mean, I was learning tax law, but I was sometimes struggling with why solutions that were beautiful from a tax point of view were discarded by commercial people. So I think I've back to what I've been talking about quite a lot is understanding the business. That is my main learning, I guess, for myself, and where I've developed is about
understanding the business. Is that something as an incoming head of tax, the number one priority? Just drop all the tax technical stuff and just get to know the business and the stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, don't drop the tax technical stuff, but keep them in the back of your mind. But yeah, I would say that to learn what the business is really about, and who are your stakeholders in the business and outside of the business, and then you can use your experience and your knowledge and leverage that.
And is that practically meaning that you just again, as said, to the extent possible, that you go on site, that you go to business meetings, that you maybe go to a plant and see what products are being made or what services you sell?
Yeah, I mean, most people love to talk about themselves and what they do. So use that and reach out to people and ask them what they do and how they contribute to the business, and ask if you can go and visit a plant or a factory or a rig or a ship or a power plant or a sales location or whatever, and see for yourself and what's going on, and people will generally be super interested in telling you that.
That is, I guess, a very big truth. Like people, if you show that you are interested in learning from them, they feel appreciated. So I guess it's also a very good recommendation for bonding in general with those stakeholders, right? That you create that relationships that you will need along the way in any case in your career already.
Exactly, yeah.
You said like that you were a bit sometimes in the firefighting zone when you were younger. Like, what other mistakes can you think that you made over the mistakes, or like things that you would not do again now that you're more mature, or now that you know what you know, looking at the younger Karl in your tax career?
I mean, I guess maybe be a bit more relaxed. Typically, people won't die because you've made a mistake. I've always been very. I mean, it's always been very important to me that whenever I've made a mistake, to kind of tell about it as soon as I find out. And the first time when I'd made a mistake, I'd messed up some accounting. I was in my first job at Maersk. I had to clear like the joint taxation accounts between companies in the accounting system. I'd never done that. I made a huge mess, and I was super concerned. Of course, I felt that I need to tell my boss about this, and I thought I was going to get fired. And of course, I wasn't fired because he said, and I've had the same approach ever since, that making mistakes is really, really good as long as we learn from them and don't do the same mistake again. I think he learned from that mistake that he shouldn't set me to do accounting, and I learned that I shouldn't do that. But I think so even though I always was very, very honest about telling about the mistakes, I was kind of scared in the beginning. As a younger person, and today I'm probably more relaxed about that. I know that it's actually a good trait and a desirable trait by head of tax to to be very honest about the mistakes that are being done, because they will happen, as long as you don't make too many of them all the time. But it's natural, and then you can tell what we've learned from them, and realize that no, you're not going to get fired, no, you're not going to get in a bad standing for reporting about mistakes. And if you find yourself in a situation where it's like a zero fault culture, that creates an environment where people tend to try and hide mistakes rather than report them, and that is super dangerous. And I wouldn't personally want to be a part of such a culture. And back to, I mean, making a mistake, no one, I mean, I don't think anyone would, we don't cause bodily harm by making mistakes, so it's not the end of the world. And
no, and I like what you said, like I mean, it's a bit a cliche, like having the safety that you know that you can make the mistake under the conditions, you can learn from it. That is clear. But what I think is even more important is that you have the safety to be transparent about the mistake you made, that you don't need to hide, but that you know I can disclose that I made a mistake.
Yeah, and one way you can minimize the risk of making mistakes is something I've also learned, and that is being upfront with your stakeholders on when you expect to be able to report. I mean, if you rush through your things, you don't have the proper time to review them, you don't have the time to ask a colleague to review them, you increase the risk of mistakes where you have to go back and fix them. So it's better to take a discussion, and we did that the first year I was head of tax here at Ørsted. Management was asking, it was kind of a messy situation because we had to rebuild the tax accounting team, and management was asking for updates on numbers all the time, and of course the numbers were preliminary, and we made mistakes, and we made the mistake of reporting these numbers to management. And then the next days they were something different, and then they asked for a bridge between the earlier number and the new number. So all of a sudden we were stuck in an endless loop of bridging mistake to mistake to mistake to mistake. So and we all agreed that this was an absolutely nightmarish process, and we decided to say to management that, listen, you'll get the numbers when they lie still. We will not report on any preliminary numbers separately. I mean, you'll get the preliminary annual report or whatever, or monthly report, but we're not going to spend time bridging from tax numbers separately unless there is a very good reason for doing that.
Yeah. All right. So you explained here a bit how the younger Karl evolved into the still young Karl, but the more mature Karl then.
The more mature.
How what is your, if you observe from it, at it from an helicopter point of view, like what would you say is the biggest evolution in the tax world from the moment when you started until the moment where we are at this day and age? Like what has changed most for you? Can you describe that?
Yeah, I think back then the tax world was very much about tax planning and designing structures that were beautiful and could save a lot of money, but maybe not very related to what's going on in the business. And today, you really need to understand the business, and it's probably more about, I guess, protecting the value by making sure that you've got the tax rules right, rather than finding elaborate schemes and planning opportunities.
Yeah. And that then again ties back to just the overall importance of understanding the business, which is only increasing year over year. Because if you would do an outlook on the next 5 to 10 years, what do you think would still change? It's obviously very difficult to predict, but what is your guess?
I can say, I mean, my hope is that policymakers and politicians will take a step back and maybe relax a bit and say, okay, we've introduced all these anti-avoidance measures for a long time now and never actually taken the time to see if they work. We've just added more and more and more. And some of them you can ask, for what purpose? What do you want to achieve? I mean, if we take like mandatory disclosure reporting to report potential aggressive tax planning, and some people say, well, it's to catch tax evasion. Well, listen, people engaged in tax evasion will not report to authorities that they engage in tax evasion. People people laundering money will not report to tax agencies that they launder money. So you need a set of measures to deal with criminal activities, and unfortunately, I think you've taken some of those measures to lay down on perfectly legitimate businesses to report and comply with, even though there has never been an issue in those businesses or with those businesses, and you don't really address the issue you want to address, but you create a lot of complexity and compliance burdens that doesn't add value for anyone, and at least not to the society. So hopefully we will look back and see, well, we can actually use tax as a positive measures, and we can create tax policy that helps growth, and maybe do a tax shift where we move tax burden from labor to pollution and the use of resources. That is my hope. Whether that will come, I mean, we do what we can to bring out that message in the tax debate, and I hope that we'll see a shift there.
Yeah, and I guess that in itself is already a courageous position, that at least you try to raise your voice there in the debate to the extent possible. So I'm every now and then taking questions from the audience as they come in.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a question about the importance of understanding the business, where somebody asked, like, how do you ensure that you accurately understand the business, especially when you are new in a position?
I think in the conversations you have with various people from the business, ask questions back. So and make sure that you've understood. So you can rephrase what they're saying for yourself, and then put that as a question to the business people. Like, so if I've understood you correctly, we do this and this and this, and this is a problem. This is an opportunity. So.
Yeah, all right, clear. I can guess the answer to this, but another question is, like, what would you advise to younger tax professionals or aspiring tax professionals? What is their one piece of advice that you would give them to excel in their career?
Yeah, it's back to what we said, but also learn how to communicate. Practice on your partner or your parents or your friends. Try to explain them a tax challenge or a tax opportunity or what you do, and try to engage with them in conversations and get them to understand what you're doing. And then you can use that when you talk to CFOs and commercial people and operational people. Yeah,
and that resonates a lot, because one of the bigger struggles I've had when I was in-house was the absence of context for the stakeholders, because we are biased and we know the context and we know why we need all those, let's say, complex questions that we are raising, or all the burden that we are putting on the stakeholders. But without the context, they don't know, and they get frustrated, and they don't have, they don't show buy-in or whatever. So context, communication, I like that a lot. So you would focus. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, and also, I mean, people you deal with will assume that you've done your homework. So don't present your homework, I mean, with all the details. I mean, cut to the chase. And the more senior people you talk with, get to the chase faster.
Yeah, no, that is well understood. A couple of maybe lighter outro questions, and we have some more from the audience here. If you are at a party, Karl, how do you explain to your to your, let's say, other than tax friends, your non-tax friends, what your job is about and why you are so passionate about it?
Yeah, I mean, I start with describing the company I work for and the vision and the strategy of the company. So that is, the vision is to help create a world running entirely in green energy, and how we do that is by building offshore wind farms and solar plants and onshore wind farms. And I work with international tax, and that is important because we deal with a lot of different countries. So it's important that we understand the tax rules in the different countries that we operate in. So that's my way of using my talent to help the company achieve its vision.
And how does that resonate with your conversation partner? Is it then like, oh wow, I also want to switch jobs? Or
I mean, most people will ask questions. So, do you know all the tax rules in all the world? And then I have to explain that no, I don't. But through experience, I've gotten a grasp of how corporate income tax regimes typically work, and what to look for and what to look out for. And yes, I know international tax treaties that allocate the taxing rights so that we can make sure that we only pay tax once and not twice, and stuff like that. Yeah. So it typically triggers other questions, and all of a sudden you have a conversation about international tax law or tax depreciation with someone that never thought they would find themselves in such conversations.
Yeah. I'm just seeing a lot of questions here coming in. So Karl, you mentioned that you were trained in law and that you had on-the-job training in regard with respect to international tax and transfer pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think to be trained in law would be necessary to be a tax manager director? Is that a requirement to have that?
No. So my my first boss and one of the best bosses I've had, he was an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've worked with brilliant VAT people who had a musical background. I think what helps is if you have a capacity for problem solving. I mean, an academic background helps you because that trains you in dealing with problems in a certain way. But I mean, the law I studied at law school, it gave me something to stand on. I think a method to use to analyze problems. I don't use my knowledge of Swedish constitutional law or Swedish criminal law in my day-to-day work, but it has given me a way to look at stuff and analyze problems.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I mean, yeah, we can talk to it. We can talk about it for hours. Like also the difference in background between an economist or economy background, and then
I mean, you have economists, you have accountants, you have lawyers.
Exactly.
You have whatever.
In your eyes, you can even become a very good head of tax without any of those, and just on the job, and then the right mindset.
I'm sure you could.
Yeah, that's hopeful, because there is a big shortage, I guess, of tax.
Yeah, there is.
I guess you can see it in the heated career markets or the job markets where everybody wants tax people.
Yeah.
That is very clear.
Yeah.
Let's see, other question here from the audience. Considering your experience with shipping, what challenges you see for airlines?
I don't know, to be honest. I guess from a more structural point of view, the challenge for airlines is similar as with shipping in terms of the green transition. When it comes to taxes, I'm sure they are similar. I'm not aware of the treatment of airline profits under the proposed Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. But yeah, maybe a bit of more context there.
Yeah. It's. I mean, the question continues with the business models that rely heavily on mobile assets and employees.
Yeah,
and there's a huge difficulty to apportion costs between jurisdictions. How to reconcile that? So yeah, but I guess
no, that is a very good point, because we have that challenge with mobile assets moving around the globe, whether it's vessels or drilling rigs or planes. And the problem is that for all these cases, someone has invested a lot of money in the tangible assets and wants to get a return out of that investment. And if you start to allocate more and more profits away from those assets, you actually start to break down something in how the market economy actually works.
Yeah. All right. That is very clear. I think as a final question here, is there any reading, tax, non-tax, that you would recommend to the audience? Any books that you are currently reading that you're super excited about, that you want to share here?
Yeah. I mean, I read tax stuff on the job. I think most people do. I don't have any particular recommendations there, but I always have a lot of non-tax reading going on. It's a great way to relax, and instead of sitting with your mobile phone when you lie in bed and you're going to bed, I have a couple of books going on right now, and the first one is I'm rereading Life, a User's Manual by Georges Perec. It's a fantastic book, and how to describe it, I don't really know, but he set up a lot of rules on how to write a book, and that is fascinating in itself. And I guess there are some messages that you can draw from it that maybe relates a bit to tax, and the first one is the puzzle in itself, how he structured the book. It reminds you about tax law sometimes, I guess. And then you also have the search for truth in that book is also something you do when you work with tax. And then I guess sadly a theme in the book is the constant failure in your structure and in your search for truth, which might be a humbling reminder to yourself in our works. And then I'm also reading what's it called, the Prague Cemetery by Umberto Eco. It's about the historical roots of modern day anti-Semitism, which I think is quite an actual the actuality is still very, very much with us. And then I just finished a completely different book called Young Mungo by a Scottish American writer called Douglas Stewart. It's I think it's a love story between two young guys, and the moral vision in the book. It's just a fantastic story. It's a beautiful story. It's a horrible story, but I can really recommend it. So those three non-tax books, one of them maybe had a tax angle, is what I'm reading right now.
Nice. Yeah, and I agree that probably the amount of tax reading that you already have on the job is more than satisfying to nudge you towards non-tax reading in your private life.
Yeah, I have no desire whatsoever to read tax stuff in my spare time.
Fantastic. Karl, we are by the end of this podcast, so I found it a very, very interesting conversation, casual though thought-provoking, as we aspired for in the beginning. So I want to thank you for that. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And yeah.
I did. Thank you, Stevi, and thanks for all the questions.
All right. Thank you, Karl. Bye.
Take care. Bye.